This presentation will be covering the extrinsic factor of how different shoeing methods affect the horse's kinematics and kinetics. This presentation will focus mostly into the horse's hoof pastern axis and how shoeing horses affects the gait characteristics and the changes in the horse's biomechanics on the forelimb. As previously stated, this topic is an extrinsic factor due to the different trimming and shoeing methods having an effect on the horse's biomechanics while also being an external factor. The horse should have roughly a 50-degree angle of the front wall of the hoof to the ground. This is also known as the hoof pastern axis. The hoof pastern axis is a term used for the relationship between the hoof wall and the pastern. If the angle is broken, it can indicate a poor trim due to either too much toe, which is called a concave break in the line, or too much heel, which is a convex break in the line. There are three categories for the hoof pastern axis, the first being straight, which is the normal relationship between the hoof capsule and supporting bones. This can be seen as image A in figure 1. The second category, as seen in figure 1 as image B, is broken forward. This sees the horse's heels being noticeably higher, with the hoof angle being too steep. In turn, this drives the pastern to adopt a more horizontal angle, which lowers the fetlock joint. The third category is broken back, as seen in image C in figure 1. The image shows the horse's heels are underslung and short with a long toe. Due to the hoof angle being too low, it drives the pastern to adopt a more vertical angle and in turn raises the fetlock joint. Trimming and shoeing are done to help the biomechanical efficiency of the horse. This means that at any gait, the horse should be completing each stride with as little effort as possible and not wasting any energy, essentially improving the horse's athletic ability. The way in which a farrier will trim and shoe a horse will be influenced by the biomechanical efficiency, as trimming and shoeing influence the way in which the horse lands in a gait and pushes off from the ground. For a horse to reach and work at the desired athletic level, the horse's hooves must be balanced. This means that when a horse's hoof lands from a stride, it should be flat or slightly heel first, as seen in the video as figure 2. The outside and inside portions of the hoof wall should then meet the ground at the same time. When the horse takes its next stride, the heel should leave the ground first with minimal resistance from the rollover of the toe. For a horse to effectively absorb and distribute stress within the forelimb, a correctly aligned hoof pastern axis is imperative. If the horse's hoof pastern axis is lower than the pastern, also known as broken back, the structures of the horse's heels will be put under stress, which in turn will affect the navicular bone, navicular bursa, and the attachment of the deep digital flexor tendon. Figure 3 represents the three categories of the hoof pastern angles, with the foot flights of low hoof angles circled. The image shows a broken back pastern axis with a 40-degree angle. A lower hoof angle has increased braking forces and transition times between braking and propulsion, exerting a more vertical force as seen in the key to the right of the image. Low heels can be caused by the breed of the horse, general hoof conformation, genetics of the horse, a weak hoof wall, lack of proper hoof care on a daily basis, a poor trimming and or shoeing technique, and an improper fitted shoe. The point of breakover in a stride is the last point of the horse's hoof or shoe to leave contact with the ground. It is the action of the hoof pivoting over the toe to lift the leg up to move forward. The flexor tendon is the lifting force as it pulls on the coffin bone to move the foot with the tendon pressing on the navicular bone. As the horse's hoof leaves the ground, pressure from the tendon on the navicular bone is reduced until the next stride when the foot lands. A horse who has been shod and left with a longer toe can cause delay on the breakover. The more force is used to lift the weight of the horse over the breakover point, therefore putting more pressure on the horse's hoof wall, navicular bone, tendons and ligaments. Farriery can influence both balance and breakover with the trim and the type of shoe and where it's placed on the hoof. Figure 4 shows images of a breakover in a stride and what the early and late breakovers look like and how the flexor tendon is stretched on the late breakover. When comparing a wild horse to a domesticated horse, a wild horse's hoof is typically short and rounded, allowing for the breakover point to be underneath the foot, relieving stress on the horse's forelimb as seen in Figure 5. This is due to the wild horses travelling on average 10 to 20 miles a day on different surfaces wearing down the hoof. However, when looking at domesticated horses, whether shod or barefoot, often have a longer toe, meaning that the breakover point is much further forward, causing more stress to be put on the horse's forelimb. Due to stress on the deep digital flexor tendon to be prolonged or exaggerated due to breakover, this can lead to bowed or strained tendons. Furthermore, the navicular ligaments which support the navicular bone may be stretched past their normal limits, which may cause navicular problems for the horse. In addition to this, unnaturally long toes cause injuries to the horse's suspensory ligaments and the proximal sesamoid bones, with more weight and stress being added to the hoof due to the angle of the fetlock and the breakover. Figure 6 represents a labelled diagram of the horse's forelimb, which is affected due to prolonged breakover. The sequence of events during the horse's breakover is: firstly, the deep digital flexor muscles tighten. Next, the deep digital flexor tendon tightens. Pressure is then applied to the horse's navicular bursa. Hydraulic pressure is applied to the horse's navicular bone through the navicular bursa. The distal and proximal suspensory ligaments of the navicular bone tighten. In turn, tension then increases in the insertion of the deep digital flexor tendon. Finally, the coffin bone then rotates in response due to these forces and in turn initiates the breakover process. A study completed in 2013 by Derbystein et al. Looked at the effects of shortening breakover at the toe on gait kinematics at the walk and trot. The research undertaken in this study looked into how shortening the point of breakover as influenced by shoe placement and its effects and influence on the stride kinematics of the horse at walk and trot. Results collected from this study show a significant change and some improvement in the horse's stride kinematics due to shortening the point of breakover. As shown in Figure 7, the hoof pattern axis is normal in Diagram A with a hoof angle of 50%. Diagram B shows an example of a horse with a broken back hoof. The final diagram, Diagram C, shows a horse with a broken forward hoof axis with a hoof angle of 60%. As shown in the hoof breakover, the horse has a lower limb movement compared to Diagram B, which was higher lift to the forelimb. A horse that has an upright foot and high heel is also known as broken forward, as shown in Figure 8. A hoof pattern axis of a horse that is broken forward can cause an excessive amount of concussion, causing issues within the joints of the forelimb, even up to the horse's elbow. An example of a breed of horse to have a high heel or broken forward is the Icelandic horse. The Icelandic horse is commonly known for its 5 natural yet unique gaits, the common 3 of the walk, the trot, the canter, with the additional gaits of the tolt and the flying pace. The tolt is a symmetric, smooth, 4-beat gait which has at least one hoof always touching the ground. The Icelandic horse is able to perform the tolt gait due to the DMRT3 gene mutation. This gene encodes a transcription factor involved in the coordination of the locomotor system in the horse's vertebrae. This is responsible for the synchronization of the left and right side of the horse's body, allowing the horse to move in new patterns at a faster pace without breaking into a gallop. Specific shoeing methods are used, creating unnaturally high and long hooves to enforce individual gait predispositions, especially in the forelimbs of the horses, or by adding additional weight to the distal limbs. A study in 2013 by Waldron et al. Undertook a study to evaluate the shoeing style of high and long hooves on loading and movement of the Icelandic horse at walk, trot and tolt. The results from this study have found that shoeing on the Icelandic horse with high, long hooves may improve gait performance, but in the long term might adversely affect the limb loading and compromise the soundness of the locomotor system. Additionally, high-hooved with long toes may have a negative impact on the health of the palmar structures of the distal foot. This is backed up again by Waldron et al. In 2020, as a study looked into the hoof conformation of the Icelandic horse and its interrelationship with hoof pathologies and tolt performance. The study found that many international Icelandic horses show deformities or deviations of the hoof from an ideal hoof balance. There were structural hoof deformities associated with a longer dorsal hoof length, with frequent findings of a broken hoof pastern axis and an imbalanced distal phalanx. To summarise, the effects of the hoof pastern angles, it is clear that both the low and high hoof angulations can have detrimental effects on the horse's anatomical structure, which will further influence the biomechanics and limb kinetics and kinematics. Both broken forward and broken back hoof angle axis are able to be fixed by the correct trimming and shoeing from a farrier to get a natural hoof shape. For the limb to be able to absorb shock from the horse's gait, but without management and care can cause long-term effects to the horse's biomechanics. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation.